And we are live. Lucinda, welcome to the show.
Hey, Rain. Good to see you.
Good to see you. It has been a little while. We first chatted a few years ago at the before the release of my book, and that was in the end of 2021. So it's been a while. Time really flies by.
Wow.
But you had a lot of great things and advice to share with me at that time. I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in, but kind of use our conversation. You may not remember it like I do because you have these conversations all the time, and for me, it was very helpful at that time. So I self-published at the end of 2021. Very happy with what I've done with that, and the goal at that time was really to use it as a marketing tool. I was doing a lot of public speaking, so to have another resource for people. I was very aware of my audience and very connected to my audience because of this show, because of things like my TikTok channel and things like that. And you had good advice that you were like, hey, hearing all of that and learning about the book, like you said, I think self-publishing might be a good route for you.
Mm,
And I took that and I've been very, very happy with that. And future books may go a different route. But now it is it's no longer, in my opinion, a dirty word, right?
yep,
At
totally.
one point, it was kind of like, oh, you self-published, you know what I mean? But like, it doesn't have to be. In fact, I know a lot of traditionally published, well-known authors that choose to now if they have, a good community that they're already in touch with. So let's kind of just touch base on those two primary options, the
Yeah.
pros and cons of both. I know this is a big question, but if you're a new author and you're considering the two, what should you consider in that decision, that big decision?
Yeah. Well, first off, I want to tell you that's exactly right about self publishing. Now it is fertile territory that agents and publishers mine for talent. And believe it or not, I'm actually often in the chair of convincing authors I work with why they shouldn't self publish, why an agent or a publisher would even be valuable to them. That's kind of laugh out loud hilarious if you consider publishing 5 years ago when, as you said, it was stigmatized. It was like, you don't want to do that. Now, people realize it gives you a lot of financial and creative control. They can hire their own team of designers and editors and more than that, Rain, much like you have, they have the platforms to launch books successfully. So some of the authors who choose to self-publish actually have the most vibrant, hungriest audience for their books. And because publishing is a long and winding road, if you launch your self-published book successfully, there's an agent and a publishing deal for you at the end of your journey. And even if you didn't launch your first self published book successfully, there may be a new idea and the right timing and the right person who sees that. So I guess, the best way to differentiate them is to begin with what a traditional publisher even provides because I'm sure you and your listeners have all heard the horror stories about publishers and what do they even do anymore, and there's so much that an author needs to generate and do, and they're not wrong, an author we're completely relying on authors to be the primary marketing machine and, like, beat the drum for their books 5 years to a life after it's sold, right? But a publisher provides beyond its expertise, its decades of expertise, editing and producing and designing great books, publicizing them, selling the foreign rights, all of those things, they provide distribution. Self-published books still are not and they cannot get to the level of distribution that a big 5 or even a, great independent can provide because those big publishers have sales accounts. They're talking to retailers to Amazon, every day of the week, getting your book placement in those brick and mortar stores as well as online. So that's the biggest difference. And what that distribution channel does for your book, more than the kind of ego thing that's like, hey, my book's in Barnes and Noble, isn't that great? You get to say to your girlfriend or whatever. More than that, it gets media attention because it's this like physical product that exists in a bookstore. It has wider reach than one could just find it online. So those are even like the first things that can come out of having a distributed book by a publisher.
I see so many parallels. My background is in filmmaking, and
Yeah.
so I've always been a storyteller, but I started taking writing more seriously 5 or 6 years ago. But I see so many parallels in the film world and the publishing world, also in the public speaking world as well. And where I'm going with this is I see a lot of people, beginners, amateurs, if you will, who have aspirations of being a writer, being a filmmaker, perhaps, that often think, I just need an agent. I just need to
Mm.
get an agent. I just need
Mhm.
to get representation. And I'm not sure, is that putting the cart before the horse? Like, what should they focus on
Yeah.
first? Because I think often they think that they need that because that's the key. But aren't there steps that should come before that?
Yeah, yeah, thank you. I have a lot to say about that, and that's really the book, Get Signed. But I wanna make sure I answered your first question,
Uh-huh.
comprehensively, because part of your question was, when should you self-publish versus not
Yeah.
self-publish? A part of it has to do with the maturity of your business or your platform, or even if you're writing fiction, where you are as a writer. Like, how experienced are you in the writing trade? Or if you're a nonfiction author, how many speaking events have you done? Hearing the same question, knowing what you're solving for your audience. On TikTok or on Instagram, if you're using social media as your metric, how are people engaging with you? What are they resonating with most? So there's this element of maturity in where you are in your expertise that comes into play. And, of course, like agents, publishers are looking there, right? So we want to see proof of an existing audience. Um, Beyond that kind of maturity, which, fun fact, apropos, many people I work with are about a decade into their career when they get the book deal. It's like
Yeah.
just a funny thing I've noticed, and I was about the same when I got my own book deal, so that's been a very strange, surreal experience. So self-publishing, makes sense for those people who are urgent to get their books out there, which, if you think that book you've been working on it for 8 years, you've gotta get out, you're not willing to wait for an agent or wait 3 years for a publisher to get it out on shelves. You've gotta get it out tomorrow. Great reason to self-publish.
That was
Yeah,
precisely my path to it as well. And I love what you mentioned earlier about it. They're not mutually exclusive, right? Like,
yeah,
you can self-publish and it can potentially be a vehicle to being traditionally published later, whether it's that book or some other book. And I remember you asked me something. It's been a while, so I'm paraphrasing, but the gist of it was, I knew I had other ideas and other books in me that I wanted to get out. So this was just the first one. And because of that, and I think that you confirmed this thought in my head, I was more interested in getting it out and almost using it as, I don't want to say this as if I didn't take it seriously, but practice, right? I knew I needed to get better. I probably knew I wasn't ready for a traditionally published book, though perhaps. Um, and I also knew that I had many other books, in the back of my head that I wanted to get out versus this is my one story that I have to
yeah.
tell. And I'm willing to wait 3 or 5 years to get better, make it better, find a good editor, find a representation, and take that home run swing. I felt at that time like if I get a base hit or a double, sorry for the baseball analogy, like I'm okay with that because this is one step towards a catalog. And it sounds like that's kind of what you're saying, or at least a
Yeah.
potential path for someone who's a first time author.
It is, and every book fits into the puzzle of your career. I mean,
Hmm.
that's what we love to do at Lucinda Literary is which is my company, is be strategists about your larger career. So whether that's you're a novelist and you want a larger career writing fiction, or you're a memoirist, but you have several memoirs in you, which we find all the time, or nonfiction, where I specialize, it's like, how is this a tool for your business? How does it fit into the ecosystem? How is it part of your larger portfolio? And guess what? Publishers are interested in that too. It's not a selfish concern, it's a business equation, right? This is the vehicle through which your book is gonna be sold. So we care about that piece of the puzzle. Um, to answer your question on Hollywood and finding the agent right away, thinking that's the right next step, I love that you asked that because, 1, publishing is a Hollywood business. It's a lookalike business. It's like, "This did well for me, I'm gonna do that." There's not too much imagination to it, unfortunately. From a business perspective, of course, it's like it's an art, it's a beauty, and there are always gonna be exceptions to that rule. But in terms of the steps you need to take, you know, these are the steps you need to take. You cannot skip the step where you just get to the pitch letter in part 6 and how to get an agent. You gotta do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 before you're getting to that, and so what I've enjoyed doing with this book is disguised as how to write your perfect pitch letter. It's actually how to create the foundation for a book that finds a wide range of readers, which is what people want with their stories, right? Touching the most readers possible, no matter the vehicle for that.
Absolutely. One of the concepts that I feel very strongly about that you absolutely hammered home early in the book, and I posted about it today actually, is this concept because I help people and coach people find like their unique approach to something based on their story. Okay, how do
Mhm.
you do what you do differently than anyone else in your field? It doesn't have
Uh,
to. It doesn't have to be a writer, right? This could be whatever, my coaching clients. And so the part that you mentioned early on in the book about finding something that is unique yet universal or touches on a universal theme and timely and timeless is so important. And so all of these steps of finding your unique voice, your twist, your perspective is not just about getting representation or getting that book done. It's about the whole thing.
yeah, absolutely, but you just nailed it, honestly, because if you had to boil down, like, the most important thing I need to show in my pitch of any kind, it's how am I new and different,
And so many
right?
people don't even spend the time to develop that voice, that unique voice before they're like, well, if I just get an agent, then everything will work out. And it's like an agent can't
Yeah,
sell you if it's
yeah.
not, unique or sellable.
And I'm the hugest believer in imitation, and I'm the hugest believer in doing your research about
Mm,
which again I talk a lot about in Get Signed. It's like you gotta know the market. You have to know what authors in your space are doing and how they're engaging their audiences. But at a point, it needs to be you and how you like what comes from within you, not even the validation of others. So if you're asking an agent, "What does the market want right now anyway? What are people buying? How much can I get for it?" It's like, you're asking the wrong questions. You're starting at the opposite end. What do you have to provide the world with, right? And then let's figure out how to carve it into something that's digestible for the market.
absolutely. Well said. You had mentioned earlier about even for your own journey, it took about the 10-year mark, which is so, so true, right? And the,
So
the
true.
old, the old like Malcolm Gladwell, 10,000 hours. Like if you're not putting a decade into it, I don't want to get too sidetracked, but
It's
so
a
many
great book.
people so many people look at the exceptions as the milestones or the what they should aim to achieve. And it's like this person might have had that early success, but most people that have been doing this for decades perhaps before
Yep.
they start to get to the public eye like that. But I'm interested in learning about your unique background, your unique story, and what led you to doing what you do now. What's the world that you came from that got you here?
I'm loving these questions. So I was an aspiring author. I was a creative writer. And that's like so many of us who enter publishing, right? I was the 9-year-old curled up with books in the car when my parents were driving, couldn't get enough books. And then that led me to being an English major and reading a lot more books and being a writer. So I had that whole experience of like going and live on a friend's sofa in a garret apartment in Paris, trying to make my living as a writer. And then my friends were like, you're from New York originally. Have you ever thought about going back to live at home? It's going to be much less expensive and trying to get a career in publishing. And I was like, light bulb, maybe I should do that at a point. So it hadn't manifested for me yet. Just as you were saying, I was super young. I hadn't really figured out what readers wanted. I was just kind of in my own head. And I went to work in publishing. My mentor at the time said, because it's competitive to go and work in publishing as well as it is to be published. And he said, don't try to enter through the front door, enter through the side door. And I was like, that's brilliant. Let me not try to be the editorial assistant that every person out of college wants to be. I'm going to take a job as a book publicist assistant. Didn't even know that was a thing. Like, I thought publicists Hollywood, but I didn't think books and authors had publicists, and it turned out that was great training. It was at HarperCollins. I worked under a tremendous boss and mentor, and I got, my feet wet in pitching books to the media and being sort of tireless advocates for books that I loved. And, I remember when I won't even mention the author, but came in holding this book to my boss's office, and I'm like, "I wanna get him on Letterman," and she's like, "That book published months ago. You need to focus on this new book." I was like, "I'm gonna get him on Letterman." So Rain, I don't even know if I got him on Letterman, but the point was I tried so
Yeah,
friggin' hard, and all of this was such great training and setup for what was
totally.
gonna happen later. So, I'll abbreviate the life story. I always say my resume is like a smattering of non-commitments that makes a lot of sense as an entrepreneur, right? But they're
Yeah,
not
yeah,
gonna hire me at Goldman, but they're
yeah.
gonna they're gonna see like, wow, she has a lot of different curiosities. So from there, I actually went into a music management role independently. I just thought, I'm also a music fan, love music. I was a child opera singer. I'm gonna go identify the best bands in New York and bring them to record labels. Like, again, had no experience, but just thought I love to advocate and, kind of establish people's careers. Eventually, I came around to what's the common ground here? I'm not working with authors anymore somehow. Love career management, negotiation, business. Wow, there's this thing called a literary agent? Like, I'm gonna go do that. And knocked on every door. Everyone's like, "Who's this 25-year-old kid with no revenue to guarantee, don't know a single author she represents?" And I found one person willing to take a chance on me. And that's what I say to writers, right? It only takes one person to believe in you. And so she gave me my shot and said, "Here's a desk, here's my Rolodex, like, start selling books or die," right? Like, it's you gotta do it's if you live
Yeah.
as an agent on commission, it's like it's feast or famine. So, so I was motivated by that, and I started selling books, and then I started my own company about 2 years later.
This is I could talk about what you just this story for the rest of the conversation if we needed to. It's such a great hero's journey that you just went on. This is an odyssey, like, finding yourself and then coming back with all the different things and interests and curiosities and lessons that you've learned and accumulated into this what you are now, this entity, right? I love the detour to the music because all that did was add to it. And you're right. And we're kindred spirits because it's called a multi-potentialite. I had someone on the show that talked about that with people with multiple interests, creative interests, and they struggle because they kind of bounce from thing to thing until or unless they find what is that central through line that connects all of those interests. And so
Mhm.
all this journey that you're telling us about, you're accumulating and building that through line, which leads you to what you do so uniquely well today. And then the beautiful thing about it is now you have fulfilled that 9-year-old girl's dream,
Isn't that
right? And that's
crazy?
I get chills
It's
thinking
like the
about it.
full circle.
It is. It's so beautiful.
Thank
So I just
you.
want to commend you and just celebrate you for that
Oh,
because I love that whole journey. Honestly, I'm getting emotional now thinking about it because this is the kind of stuff I love to talk about on the show because we get so in our heads about it didn't work and this wasn't the door. And I love that line about don't go in the front door, go in the side door. I had Stephen Pressfield on the podcast a while back, and he had this concept of like if you only focus on one point, you can it can be a hindrance, right? Because if you don't hit that perfect target, then everything was a failure, right? But
right,
instead, if
right.
you look at your destination as a horizon, you may land just to the right of the point and do something that you didn't anticipate doing that's just as fulfilling if not more fulfilling that's in that same
Yeah.
general space or in your journey actually brings you to the initial goal, which I just think is very cool. So there's no real question to that. I just think it's so cool. It's literally the hero's journey. You went off to
Thank
find
you.
yourself and you brought back the elixir and lived as your authentic self. It's quite
Well,
beautiful.
here's the wild thing, and for publishing a book, like, the afterlife has been really interesting. So, the book was an infant I needed to nurture 24/7 in February and March when it came out, and now we're April, May, and it's like, "Okay, the launch is effectively over,"
Mhm.
and guess what I love doing now? Agenting. what I did before. But
Yeah.
with this knowledge base and this compassion for authors and this deep understanding of where they're struggling and sort of success strategies I learned in launching my own book, which I hadn't actually seen them do before, which now I'm like so passionate to bring to them. It's like my agent game has been up leveled by this experience, and I'm so happy to be back in the not in the driver's seat, but sort
Yeah.
of behind the talent, selling new books and editing new books and developing submissions. I'm just like, I'm so happy to be here.
Well, it's got to help your ability to empathize with them, as you kind of alluded to, and therefore guide them better because like now you're not sitting across the table from them, but you can come sit down on the same side and be
Yeah,
like, "Look, I get it. I've been here." Instead of what I assume, this is an assumption, you know, often agents are probably, coming at it from a market perspective and what works and what doesn't work. And obviously they're advocates for their clients, for their authors, but now you can be like, yeah, I know exactly what you're going through
yeah.
at this act 2, dip that you're taking where you can't figure out, the way forward. So it's got to help you be better
I
at
mean,
doing that.
tiny example happened last night. One of my beloved authors, best friends, whatever, texted me, like, his new outline structure, texted this to me, and I'm like, I'm not looking at my desk. A lot of my authors do this. They're just like they're so heated up by the idea, they're so enthusiastic, they gotta text their agent, "What do you think?" And it was like a slight pivot on maybe one word that was in the original outline, and I'm thinking, "Why the heck is this any different from what I saw?" And I'm not at my computer to cross compare, and he's like, it's a cosmetic detail, but I have just belabored this, and it seems cosmetic, and it's so meaningful, and in that moment, I'm like, "I know exactly what you mean," because you think of every word, you think, "What could be better about every word? What is the"
Mhm.
there's so much kicking of the tires in writing a book. It's like nothing I've ever been through before, and so I would have, like, agent pre-author experience would have been like, "Get over it, dude, it's an outline," in my head, I would have said that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
something like that might have come out on text because 'cause I'm very direct with my authors. But, in this case, I was like, "I feel you, I know how important this is. I'm gonna look at this." Um, and it was genuine. It's so bizarre.
Speaking of being very direct, you had mentioned something earlier about memoirs. I think
Mm,
we are just talking about the different ways we can you can different stories that you can tell in a book format. But I I see this a lot. I know that you do too. Eh, I- Who I specifically help, Lucinda, are beginners, for lack of a better word. Like I help
same.
people get from 0 to 1 in storytelling. I'm not helping Nike or Apple or Coca-Cola. I'm helping out small businesses, solopreneurs, content creators, etc. And a lot of people, like newsletter subscribers, will come back and they want to tell their story. They want to write a book. They want to write a memoir. And I think that this is very pervasive. Like I think a lot of people land on that like, oh, well, I went through this thing, no shade, a divorce or something, like that, and they came out better. Good for them, and they feel like it's a story worth sharing with the world. Um, what is your advice for those
Yeah.
people? I don't want to guide this answer too much, but I think your
Yeah,
expression tells me
sure.
that you might get you're picking up what I'm putting down.
I mean, you and I do such similar things, it's amazing. But absolutely, I think with the biggest audience we have is memoirists. And a lot of that comes out of the catharsis of telling a painful experience,
Yeah.
also the mission of sharing the message and what you've learned. So it's all extremely admirable and it's all extremely brave and it's all extremely difficult. The issue is that I'm going to be straight with memoirists from a commercial marketing standpoint of if you haven't defined, again, what's new and different, where you stand in this very crowded shelf of celebrity memoirs, TikTok celebrity memoirs, you know, whatever the case may be, household names. Um, eh, Many people or like known journalists and writers is often the case, right? Because most of these people writing memoir have not really been trained as writers. And memoir is evaluated very much like fiction. It's all about what's on the page.
Mhm.
oftentimes memoir doesn't allow us the poetic liberties that a novel might. And even then, you may not be right to write a novel if you haven't had that training in writing, by which I mean you don't need an MFA, but you need to be trying your hand somewhere, getting published, being online, writing in some form, in workshops, getting edited. You can't just come with your story to an agent, right? So I guess I have so much advice to share with memoirists, but one thing to really think about is the market is looking for escape. We're looking for levity and escape. We're
Mm.
we're looking for something unworldly, otherworldly rather. Like, take us from a place we know to somewhere we've never been, but we're gonna be relating throughout to your journey, to your hero's journey, to the arc of your story. So, if something is hitting me over the head with this is painful, loss, affliction, divorce, trauma, right? Um, unfortunately, no matter how, like, valiant this endeavor is for you, we're gonna have to pass because there isn't entertainment value there.
That's a great point, and at first, I'll be very honest with you, subconsciously, I kinda pushed back in my mind to that word "escape," and I would have countered with, "Well, I think they're looking for value," but as you kept talking and I kept thinking and listening, you're 100% right, and even nonfiction, you're not necessarily looking for an escape like a lighthearted comedy, you're looking for an escape from your current struggles, you, the reader.
Yeah,
Right?
totally.
Which is value. And this is a little epiphany that's going, so they're not looking like, if I read a nonfiction book and it only talked about the problems of being a solopreneur or a small business without any solutions, right? Then that's a pretty terrible read, and I
Yeah.
probably wouldn't enjoy that experience or want to pay for it. Versus right? Versus, okay, no, you're showing me the escape to
Yep.
those problems that I deal with every single day. You're not just bashing me over the head with it. And similarly, if we switch back to memoir land, if I'm just reading a book that's about pain, 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 that's a tough pill to swallow without any sort of escape, to use your
Yeah.
word. So I think that might apply to all
Yeah.
books, perhaps.
So exactly, that's exactly what I was gonna say. So, escape every book, every great book should read for the screen,
Mm,
and nothing is more, essential to that than fiction or memoir as examples, right? Meaning, if you're picking up a book, you wanna be seeing the movie. Your query letter is your movie trailer. We could
mhm.
talk about pitch letters all day long, but that's how you need to be thinking about this. Your book is your movie, your query is your movie trailer. Both of those things have to be super engrossing, hook you in, keep you moving, have a point, leave you somewhere. Beginning, middle, end. What's happening here? So it's unbelievable how many pitch letters don't actually articulate that for agents. So usually the manuscript hasn't articulated that either. Hasn't found its way, hasn't found its voice or its point. So that's what I mean by escape. You're dealing with more free online content than ever before. Everyone wants to go to Netflix and watch a great series. What's going to compete with that is a really engrossing book. And fiction and memoir have more pressure than any other genre to deliver that. And yet, even the kinds of like CEO, entrepreneur, PhD, all the stuff I do, Rain. It's like I love working with creatives and leaders and entrepreneurs. Even then, the best book proposals we see and we sell, you could imagine them like on the screen. 'Cause
Yeah,
they're made of great stories.
absolutely. Just to um, address the people that may be offended or feel some kind of way about the memoir issue that we just tackled. You
Sure.
said this word about it being cathartic,
Mhm.
and I just want to illustrate that that process is still cathartic if you go on it not with the intention of selling a or having a bestseller with it. And I'll use myself as an example. The first book that I ever wrote was The Last 40 Days with My Father, and it was about just it was a crazy month, and I had journaled it all at that time, and 10 years later I wrote it in the form of a book. No one has read that to this day but me. It wasn't intended for the world. It was just to get it out of my head and out of my heart. Lucinda, maybe I'll publish it in 10, 15 years, maybe not, but that wasn't the point. The point was just to go through that process, and it was very helpful.
Good.
So I think there could be a world where someone does something like that. Like you can go through the process, but it's really difficult to sell your personal story when there aren't those pieces that we were just talking about. So I just wanted to include that too, kind of for the other side
Yeah,
of the
thank you for
coin.
saying that, and it's it's practice, it's catharsis, it's sharing it, it's finishing the book,
All
it's
of that.
and you need a lot of distance from your personal story in order to write it. So that's another issue with memoirs. It's like they're fresh out, fresh out of the experience. They want to put it on paper. That's what your journal is for. If you
Yeah.
want to self-publish it, you go for it. But in 5 years, 10 years time, you might find that there's a novel to be written from out of that personal experience, or it's going to be like a backdrop to this great self-help book you're going to write.
Totally. I mean, honestly, the practice of it was a big a big plus to that process was that I found my voice. I found how to get better at writing, and you also said this, completing it. That's such a I've got
Huge.
ten uncompleted screenplays, as well as every other screenwriter in the world, so like just finishing it and putting the end on it was such an accomplishment and a psychological switch for me that allowed me to then self-publish the book, the nonfiction book that I did, a couple of years later. So it can still be part of the process, even if you land on that it's not exactly sellable to a wide audience.
Sure.
It doesn't mean that it's not worth the journey. It can quite be effective for your writing career, I think.
Yeah. And
Um,
and honestly, rain success is the best revenge. I mean, I feel this way when my books sell or become bestsellers and all the publishers that passed, I'm like, take it. But if you're an author who chooses to self-publish because you've gotten rejected everywhere you've queried and no publisher or agent saw it, it's like, make it and you believe that there's a real audience and market for it, make it successful, like, make them see what you saw. So, you're
good
right,
point.
they're like 2 different sort of getting back to our point, of self-publishing, there
Hmm.
there are different reasons for it. Urgent, catharsis, share your legacy, share your story, go through that ritual of writing and publishing, or there's the, "No one saw it, but I've got something really commercial here, and I'm just gonna sell the hell out of it, prove 'em wrong."
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, Another group of people that I work with a lot are emerging thought leaders or experts in their field. Talk to me about the balance of when writing. So, this would probably be more of a nonfiction approach. The balance between academic and personal, or intellectual and emotional
Mm,
writing for
thank
someone
you.
like that, for an expert or thought leader.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Again, these questions are awesome.
Thanks.
Again, we have to think of a literary product as story driven and
Mhm.
cinematic would be even better. So that emotional piece and that vulnerability, which is particularly hard for CEOs and leaders in their field. I mean, I have stories, I won't reveal the names. They usually are men. And I try to like say, readers are going to care about your struggle that got you here, right? And self-help or business books, it's the teacher becomes the student, 3 times over. We're all on the path to learning. The learning is not complete by the time the person finishes the book, and there's usually a pain point that brought them there or a point of fascination. So you can be on that discovery journey with the reader. The best self-help books are, but you've gotta be willing to be vulnerable and reveal those deeply personal stories, which can be uncomfortable. The reaction that a reader should have is pretty visceral, like, like pain in the gut. I'm rooting for that guy, and he just got kicked down. We don't wanna see people being glossed up and successful all the time, right? That has its place in the book, but it's usually not at the beginning of the story. So, answering your question, I think there needs to be, for self-help, because that's what we're calling it, otherwise known as personal growth and personal development and self-improvement, and pick your wording, um, there needs to be a teaching to it. That teaching needs to be new and different, not sound like everything else we've read. There also should be a storytelling aspect that is personal, that is emotional.
You're absolutely right about that being why the audience or how the audience can empathize with, and that's what has us engage, right? When we want to root for that person. But also, I find that if we see someone who's just glossing over their story and we're only seeing the positive highlights, it doesn't make me feel like I can do it, right? Because I'm struggling over here. And if I see that everything's just been, success for you, then I'm just learning about you, but it doesn't make me feel like after I read this book, then I can go apply it to my life and have success too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you know as well as I do, people come to you saying, "Everyone thinks I should write a book." It's like, who's
Yeah.
everyone,
Yeah. Exactly.
right? It's your immediate circle, but I'm thinking in particular of business leaders, they're surrounded by people who work for them. Those people are naturally gonna be, probably more sycophantic or even just admirers and fans. That's not the audience you're solving a problem for, right? You're writing a book because you have heard a problem again and again and again, and you uniquely have the trust, the authority, and the solution for it, uh, to a particular audience. So, again, working with a lot of business people, what we most often see is the business book that is actually a memoir, or we see the business book that has a lot of sort of old adages, like true as platitudes, or just sort of like we learned that 5 years ago, and Dan Pink's book and Gladwell's book, whatever it may be. They haven't done necessarily the market research because anyone in their inner circle, people are saying, "That's brilliant, Rain. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Do that as a book," right?
Hmm.
So they need to really discover what is revolutionary about what they're doing. A book can be nothing short of revolutionary.
Mm. Um, this brings up a question in my mind. It's a nuanced question. What is the difference, or where is the line between personal development, self-help, and a business book?
Yeah,
Because I think there's an overlap there for
yeah,
some people, or like my book we talked about could have gone either way if I turned the knob a certain way.
sure. The best, honestly, the books that the market is looking for now and post-pandemic, because organizational business has sort of changed, right? People working from home, work life being more integrated than ever before. We've seen a lot of the traditional business imprints like McGraw-Hill, storied business press have folded. So the books that the market is looking for in business are the self-help blends, right? They are the general audience business books, the business books that you can apply if you're a stay-at-home mom looking to like run the PTA and you're learning how to get ahead, right? So yes, will they take a primarily professional audience? Absolutely. And you shouldn't sort of see it, you should prove it otherwise. Um, you shouldn't hard pitch it otherwise, but the best business books will have that kind of crossover into personal growth territory. Because a lot of those same rules apply, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to spend a little bit of time for those listening. Sometimes this is in the film world as well, especially for aspiring authors or filmmakers. The industry is so opaque, right? Like, they don't. There's gatekeepers and people aren't sure. There's not a lot of information out there about the path in. There's not just one path in, and I think that limits a lot of people from understanding what steps that they should take. So, can we walk through the actual process? Like, pretend first time writer. I have an idea. You had mentioned earlier. You said something about the query being your trailer, like your movie
Yeah,
trailer.
yeah.
So let's just, I mean, very fundamental. Like, what is the process if I have a book idea and I want to be traditionally published or represented by someone like you? Where do I start? What do I do? What exactly is the process?
Okay, great. So going back to that movie trailer thing, because it always resonates with people, you don't create the movie trailer before you have the movie. So first you make sure you're writing a damn good book, the best book you could write. And you're ideally getting an editor, a trusted editor. If you can't afford an outside editor, then at least someone in your circle who you trust. I always say your most skeptical best friend, right? Not the person who's just going to send you the flowery praise. In my own process, just like tiny side note, I put together a survey, a Google survey, and I sent it to 15 people collection, a smattering of people that were relevant to the target audience, not my mom who reads books in translation, my my clients, my students, my editor colleagues and agent colleagues, and I made it really simple for them to fill in the blanks rather than write me a bunch of praise about what the problems were, what the weaknesses are. So that's what you're going for before you're going out to an agent. You're writing a great book, you're getting it edited, and you're thinking about what's new and different. There are some other conditions I give in the book, which would be like universal themes plus unique point of view, right? Things that have always worked, things you gravitate toward, and then adding your unique twist. So you're making sure you're writing a great book. Then you are doing the data on the market, like you're doing the data collection, the research on the market. What's actually selling? How do I now take what I'm convinced is a great book and sort of make it fit in the market? Best way to do that, look right at Amazon. See what's selling, use the keywords that look at the books that inspired you and see how those are positioned. Amazon has a great way of highlighting the elevator pitch right at the top. It's a question or it's a statement or, it's a what happens in the book in 2 lines. Your pitch letter could be done the same way, by the way. You don't need to like follow the guidelines of an agency. I am a rule breaker and a lot of agents are going to hate me for saying as much in my book, but it's like we're all looking for the same thing. So why don't you follow a proven template that works, which is Amazon? So you're doing the data, and then you're finding your reader, right? You're finding who is connecting with you and why. Then you're going out getting seen. So best case scenario, agents are coming to you, you're not going to them because you're out there on social media being active, or you're writing a newsletter that lots of people are reading in your area, or you're out there in the media, or you're publishing. If you're like just a writer by trade, you're publishing bylines. If you're a memoirist, someone's featuring your story, or you're doing like a mini essay based on the memoir that you're pitching. These are all ways to get out there, and then people like me are writing you, because a lot of the business that all of us do comes from scouting. So that's another point, like, you get seen. So now I'm already at step 5. So it's like, 1, creating the great book, 2, doing the market research, 3, finding your reader, um, finding your voice, getting seen, and now you're ready to put it all together in your movie trailer, only when you've done all of those things. So your query letter, there's in Get Signed, I give a whole sort of anatomy for it. I give a lot of myth busting insights. I didn't want to say the same old thing that you're reading online or in the books before. I wanted to give you a lot of like new hacks, ones that agents use to sell books. We have to compensate for weaknesses. We have to lead with your strengths. These are all the things that we do. We have to include an urgent closing, not just passively say like, "Hey, Rain, let me know if you're interested." It's like,
Mhm.
"Rain, gotta get back to me in 24 hours, and here's why." It's not bullshit. You gotta get back to me in 24 hours, but here's why. So we're helping them to do all of these things. And then you've also got to research the agents who are right for you. You're not going to slush 50 agents with one form letter. You've got to go to the people, tailor your letters, make sure there's a win-win that's apparent in your pitch, that you're a fit for their list. So, that's kind of the process.
What do you how do you find an agent, or where do you find
Yeah.
that information?
Yeah. So there are a lot of sites out there. I mean, we're on Query Manager and Manuscript Wishlist. There's Query Tracker. There's Agent Query. I always get a little sad when someone finds me on Agent Query and then they come to me saying, "I found you on your Agent Query." It's like, maybe you found me on Agent Query, but then you saw that I was on a podcast with Rain. You listened to that podcast and you decided I'm the agent for you, right? Maybe you read the book and you identified as a crusader, which is one of the 4 types of writers who get book deals that I talk about. So it's like, show something that you've done your research, a little personal. You've read a book I represent. It really moved you. Those are the different ways that you can be fine. I mean, they always say start with the acknowledgments of the books that you love, but my twist to that, Rain, is there are a lot of people who are running agencies who represented that bestseller that you love. They may not be looking for new clients. They may just be serving Glennon Doyle,
Yeah,
right? They
yeah.
may just be serving Michael Lewis. So why don't you go for someone who's kind of on the mid manager or junior agent level who's been training under that person for years, who might be hungry to develop a pipeline,
Mhm.
has been mentored by that person at a very good agency, that's the person to pitch.
Yeah. It's also similar to doing the due diligence to finding your voice, right? Is finding the right fit, because that agent may not represent the type of author that you are. But I know that the creators often don't do that. They just want the agent. We're back to the same kind of,
Yep.
issue. And oh, well, so and so had this agent, so I want them. It's like they don't even represent your type of book.
Yeah.
Or and reaching out to them, because I get reached out to for the show or for other things too. It's always that personal connection. I can tell when someone's like, hey, I love the storytelling lab, and they just include the most recent episode, right?
Yeah.
Versus like, hey, I really liked your episode with so and so, and this hit me. That's
Yes,
always gonna,
exactly.
pique my interest more and catch my eye. But having that, so you got to do the work. There's no way around it, right? If you
No way
have
around
a
it.
list of 100 agents, you don't just run down the list. Like, find the one, like, oh, I bet Lucinda would like this because these are the types of books she likes to work with.
Totally. And back to the side door approach, it's even if you're based in Milwaukee, and you're so far from New York City, because this is a thing that's been revelatory, like, in the courses we teach people are, "Wow, I always thought that since I am not New York adjacent and I don't know anyone in the industry, that I couldn't get a book deal because it's this, like, club. It's this little
Mm.
network that you can't." There's some degree of truth to that, and I don't want to again, I'm not here to BS writers. There's some degree of truth to it. But how do you get into the club? Well, you find the one author you know. They could be a children's author, but they have an agent. Hey, would you mind forwarding my tiny pitch? You got to be really respectful of people's time to your agent and seeing if they're not willing to have a conversation with me, because I totally understand that. Do they know someone else who could,
Yeah.
who could take a look? So it's like using that one to one connection until you
Yep.
find the right person.
It's all networking. I mean, and you're right.
It
Like,
is.
it may not be them, it may be someone they know, and it's all about how you approach it. It's not this gimme, gimme, gimme thing. And it's even that initial approach, that has to be the right person. It has to make sense for them. I've had the privilege of being connected to a lot of people through the show, and so you build that network. And hey, if you have a horror screenplay, like I have coming up, then I probably know a horror filmmaker or two now that I could send that to.
Sure.
But that doesn't happen unless I spend the years that I have, like, connecting with these people, making genuine connections first. I mean,
Yeah,
I know that's age old advice, right? Who you know.
totally.
But
So
often people won't put in the time.
yeah, I know we're wrapping up, but I
Mhm.
love giving examples.
Yeah, no, examples are good.
So besides holding up the book jacket, which of course we have to do, right? I tell my authors to do the same. But in this book, I tell the story of Susan Pierce Thompson, who is one of my New York Times bestselling authors, and she came to me when I was about to go on maternity leave with my first kid, and I almost didn't take the call because I wasn't looking to sign up new clients. And this woman was so impressive. Her elevator pitch is she is a neuroscientist who was a former drug addict who realized that food addiction was the toughest addiction she had to quit. Wow, like, mind blowing. There it is. There it is. That's how we got her on the Today Show, because that's all you need to know about Susan, right? But
Mhm.
she we had a talk. I was really impressed. She said, "I'm going to go out and build the platform so you know that I'm like the real deal," right? She went out and built the platform, and guess what? Hay House, along with other publishers, came to her because they saw what she was doing. So at that point, it was like, I like to think I'm not extraneous, but I was the phone call of, "Hey, can you broker the deal?" Because so that's always an ideal position to be in. But the example of how Susan networked and networks is so compelling. She went to I guess James Clear reached out to Susan when she had an email list and this video blog. She does a vlog every week. And of course, she was one of the forerunners doing this. Like, most people weren't
Yeah.
doing video blogs at the time. James Clear reached out, like, for her to send a promotion out to her email list. She said, "You know what? I'll do you one better. I'm gonna have you in to talk with me in a private conversation," because obviously her fans love her, "and they're gonna have to buy a book to get access to this." She sold, like, thousands of books for James Clear before he was James Clear as we know him.
Right, right.
Comes time to launching her last book, and she's like, "Knock, knock, James." Can you do me a solid?" Of course, he's like, "I'll do you a solid. You helped me then." So, it's being creative, it's being genuine, but it's being creative in the ways that you can help people, and they will help you later, and calling in favors is publisher speak, like, they're always saying, "Is this person gonna call in favors?" It's the one shot you've got when you launch a book. So, anyway, enough time spent with me. Um,
Well, one last thing
yeah,
before we go, you had mentioned, scouting.
yeah,
What are you currently looking for moving in, and now that the book's out in 2024 and beyond? Are you looking for new genres? Are you looking for, like, what are you scouting for
yeah,
at this moment?
thanks for asking. So, I am a sucker for books by psychologists or entrepreneurs. Like, I notice time and time again when those come into my slush pile, I immediately look at them, because they've been my greatest teachers historically, and they've been fun to sell, and they've been, my big sellers. So I've developed the relationships, the expertise in it. So of course, I'm still looking to do, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's my specialty. However, I am now taking some liberties, you know, doing what I love, which is I do love literary stuff, right? I was a reader first and foremost, so I wouldn't say I'm looking for literary fiction, that being incredibly tough without, like, super tight credentials, being in the club, and even so, I think it's a very hard category to sell in as a new author, but commercial, upmarket, well-written novels for smart readers, likewise narrative nonfiction. Give me a Bad Blood or business narrative or an Uncanny Valley, like, if there is a business setting and a coming of age. A Sweetbitter would be another example from years ago. That's always like, that's gonna be great, but narrative nonfiction that reads like fiction. So to answer your question, like, really, really tight, I do a lot with big platform authors. If you have a big platform, come right over here. I know how to get you a great book deal. But I'm also interested in literary writers, just like writers by trade who can write super well. And that's an area that I just haven't explored to the level that I feel like I now have the permission and the interest in exploring.
Well, awesome. Maybe we can make that happen going into 2024 and 2025. Hopefully, you can
Great.
get some new ones. Yeah, if I know anybody, I'll send them your
Amazing.
way. But listen, this has been incredible. We covered so much ground. This is exactly what I wanted out of this conversation.
Oh,
I
thank
appreciate
you,
you and your
Rain.
time so much.
Thank you so much. Well, we need to catch up.
Let's
Um,
do that,
yeah.
seriously, but I wanna say, like, congrats on the book. I meant what I said earlier, like, I'm so inspired by your hero's journey, as I
Oh, thank
called it, and,
you.
this is really cool to see it manifest in this.
Amazing. Thank you so much, and thanks to everyone who's watching or listening.